T-minus 21 seconds, and the solid rocket booster engine gimbal now underway. T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Now control.
Roger, roll, Challenger.
Good, roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles, downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
Those who apparently died this morning aboard the 25th shuttle mission: Francis R. Dick Scobee, spacecraft commander. He was born May 19th, 1939 in Washington State. He became a NASA astronaut in 1978, received a BS degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Arizona in 1965. Judith Resnik was a PhD. She was one of the 3 mission specialists aboard this flight. She was born April 5th, 1949 in Akron, Ohio. She received a BS degree in electrical engineering from Carnegie Mellon University and a PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Maryland. She became an astronaut in 1978. There was Sharon Christa McAuliffe, who is a teacher from Concord, New Hampshire. She was selected as the first citizen in space for the NASA Teacher in Space project in July of '85. Christa, as she liked to be called, was born September 2nd, 1948 in Boston. She received a BA degree from Framingham State College and a master's degree in education from Bowie State College in Bowie, Maryland. Ellison Onizuka was on board, Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Air Force. He was a mission specialist. He became an astronaut in 1978, born June 24th, 1946, in Hawaii. He received a BS and MS degrees in aerospace engineering from the University of Colorado. He became a NASA astronaut in 1978. Gregory B. Jarvis, a payload specialist, a laser specialist, was on board. He was born August 24th, 1944, in Detroit. He received a BS degree in electrical engineering from the State University of New York at Buffalo, an MS degree in electrical engineering from Northeastern University in Boston. Ronald E. McNair, a PhD mission specialist, became an astronaut in the class of 1978. He was born October 21st, 1950 in Lake City, South Carolina. He received a BS degree in physics from North Carolina, A&T State University, and a PhD in physics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Those were the people aboard the space shuttle this morning. Joining us on the line now from the Kennedy Space Center, CNN's John Zarella. John, update on recovery efforts.
Yes, Lou, I was just informed just a few moments ago that the recovery vehicles, this comes from Lieutenant Colonel Robert Nicholson of the Department of Defense, that the recovery vehicles have spotted some floating debris, including what appears to be a piece of debris with a parachute on it. Now, of course, he says that, to qualify that, of course, that could be part of the SRB, the solid rocket booster, which would have returned to Earth with the parachute, those reusable boosters. There is still no word on the orbiter's location, if indeed any parts of the orbiter are still intact. The swells in the Atlantic are running 15 to 18 feet. Visibility is very low out there at the site of the recovery operation, so helicopters have now been sent back to Patrick Air Force Base to wait for the low cloud cover to clear. But again, just to update you, they have identified pieces of floating debris, one of which appears to have a parachute attached to it. Lou?
All right, John Zarella at the Kennedy Space Center. We'll be in touch with you. Again, floating debris has been spotted by the recovery teams now working off the Kennedy Space Center. Science correspondent Tom Mentier now.
Lou, the NASA's ambitious schedule of 15 missions this year, there have been problems from the start, starting in December of last year. That was when Columbia was scheduled to lift off from the Kennedy Space Center. It didn't leave until 1986. And there were problems with the weather, problems with mechanics, and then the problems really rubbed off into Challenger as it waited while Columbia circled trying to find a place to land. They tried to bring it back to the Kennedy Space Center, but were unable to because of bad weather at the Kennedy Space Center a couple of weeks ago. So then when it finally landed at Edwards Air Force Base in California and was brought back aboard a 747, Challenger had been sitting on the launch pad for quite some time. Originally scheduled on the 22nd, there have been 5 postponements of this mission. The record was Columbia with 7. There were 3 weather postponements. Yesterday, we saw problems not only with the weather, but with the mechanical aspects. The handle on the outside of the entry hatch that leads into the shuttle evidently stripped a screw. This was noticed after they found that the micro switches were not closing properly on the shuttle, on the doorway, and they were getting some sensors in the inside of the cabin that they were not closing properly. Then they discovered that the handle, which is taken off before flight, had the screw stripped. They then sent away for a drill to take that screw out so they could go ahead and continue with the countdown. At that point, they were still planning on going. When the drill arrived, it had a dead battery in it. They had to send away again. They were delayed nearly by 2 hours, this all occurring at a time when the weather was okay for the launch. Finally, they had to cut the bolt off, the titanium bolt, which is super hard, with a hacksaw. After they cut the bolt off, they removed the handle, went ahead and put the thermal protection into place. But after waiting for nearly 2 hours through good weather, bad weather once again moved into the launch area, and the winds at the runway, where they would have returned had there been a problem then, were in excess of 30 miles an hour. These are not acceptable to NASA flight rules, so they decided to scrub again for today. There was some concern yesterday about the temperatures falling in Florida. They reported that it was snowing yesterday in Jacksonville for about 8 minutes, so there was some concern about the cold temperatures. They monitored it into last night. They decided that they could go ahead and fill the external tank with oxygen and hydrogen, and that tanking took place about an hour late, an hour behind schedule, because there were some problems with the fire suppression equipment on the pad. They were evidently not acclimating to the cold weather. By then, the temperature was below freezing. This morning, 24 degrees on the launch pad. They continued the count, got into this morning, decided to move it back because of those problems with the fire suppression, moved it back 1 hour from 9:37 to 10:37, and at that point, they decided to move it back another hour when they noticed that there was some ice on some of the remote service structures surrounding the space shuttle. They sent a team of 8 men up who worked for about a half an hour knocking those 2-foot-long icicles off. NASA had an emergency meeting to decide if they would go ahead with the count. The decision was made at that point to go ahead with the count. They went down and launched Challenger, and a minute into flight, it exploded. Lou?
All right, Tom. On the line now, Frank Seltzer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Frank, what are you hearing there?
Lou, there are more questions than there are answers right now. Nobody really knows for certain exactly what happened. Word from mission control that we have had so far was that about a minute 15 into the flight, all telemetry stopped at about the same time as when you saw the fireball that became the Challenger. Basically, the reaction here has been one of stunned silence. There are about 20 people in the public affairs office, mostly NASA contractors, watching the liftoff. And it was like, as it was for me and for many other people, I'm sure, you watched it, and it wasn't quite certain what happened at first. It looked like the solid rocket motors had, in fact, jettisoned, and then the realization that, no, in fact, it had exploded and Challenger was no more. That was the reaction in the public affairs office and also here in Building 2, which is the visitor center at the Johnson Space Center. People are walking around a bit in the days wondering what happened, and they are taking it personally here in Houston, where it is also called Space City, the home of the Johnson Space Center. So it's right now, there's going to be a news conference in about a half hour from the Kennedy Space Center. They hope to try and answer some questions, but the word is around mission control that right now there are just questions and no seemingly answers.
All right, Frank Seltzer, we'll be getting back to you at the Johnson Space Center at Houston, the nerve center of the space flight program.